Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar organized by the MeCCSA Social Movements Network. Let me introduce you to our speaker today. She's Myriam Ojeda. Myriam is a national peace counselor for Colombians abroad in Europe. She's a human rights defender. Her objective is to expand and strengthen the participation of the Colombian nation abroad in peace building processes. So she will talk to us about the recent events in Colombia. The event will be recorded and uploaded to the MeCCSA YouTube channel. So I will distribute the link when it is available. Myriam is planning to speak for about 15 minutes. And then there will be an opportunity to ask questions and engage in discussion. So over to you, Myriam.
Hello, and thank you for this invitation. It's very important for us to speak to the people in the UK and wherever possible about the situation in Colombia. I think, Ruth, if you pin my frame, I will be in the main frame, and probably that will give better view of what I'm speaking about. But thank you very much for tuning. The situation in Colombia is been in the news for a while now, especially in the UK as a rare event. We have seen news coming from The Guardian, from the BBC, BBC World and BBC Mundo, who covers Colombia. The Economist, the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Rolling Stones. The cover has been unusual, I think, because of the sustained protest movement of young people in Colombia. And that is something that we haven't seen since probably the 70s, when there was the last time we had a very big national strike. So it's been 50 years without this uprising, and this called immediately the international attention, and people started asking why this is happening, what is happening. The strike started on the 28th of April in a call from, let's say, traditional associations, workers, representations, the agro sector, the agro-industrial sector representations, the farmers representation, and some other sectors of the industry who normally call for a one-day strike. And it's quite common, these calls, especially since 2019, after the peace process was signed. There was, you had in 2016, the agreement being signed. And then the 2018, we had elections, and the rise of the alternative movements was big. We had 8 million people, over 8 million people voting for the candidate who was in opposition to the establishment. And so this has been slowly growing. And in 2019, there was a big movement also for the protests in a sustained manner, but nothing compared with what happened this year. The 2019 movement, which also held for about a month, but it was on a much lesser intensity, and it was held by the pandemic. So the situation was confusing after we had to go into quarantine, and the quarantine revealed all the flows that we have in the country, in our economical system, in our political system, our social fractures, the weakness of our institutions. I mean, the pandemic kind of scanned through all our illnesses as a society, not only as the state weakness, but the attitude of the government towards the lower and middle classes. I think the pandemic kind of put the perspective very clear, who was in power one more time, and what were their plans for recovery, which did not contemplate the needs of the majority, but only the needs of a small minority, mainly commercial elites, industrial elites, financial elites, who took most of the bonus for recovery. And I think this just really angered people throughout, middle classes and lower classes. And on top of that, Mr. Duque decided one day, Mr. Duque is the president of Colombia, decided one day to announce a tax reform, very aggressive towards the middle class. A section of this, the biggest portion of the Colombian society is the middle class, and the tax reform was pointing at them like they had to pay the bill, and they had to pay for the bonus for the rich, and they had to pay for everything. And I think that when people say enough is enough, enough is enough, and that brought mainly young people on the streets. And it started as a protest for the reform, and slowly built up into a resistance movement, a sustained protest by the young people who took territories of land, mainly in the city of Cali. And here I would like to bring on the screen 3 minutes. This is a long documentary that was done in Colombia a few weeks ago, maybe two weeks ago, no more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. And the Vice News, who was on Cali, they managed to go inside one of these points of resistance, which are territories who are surrounded by lots of fences, improvised fences, and people kind of live in there, like live in there and create all kind of social constructions, small social constructions there. So you have the people who are the paramedics, the legal advisors, the people who peel potatoes and be in the communal kitchen, and of course the young people who are in the front line of primera línea. I would like you to see the first 3 minutes of this documentary, and then we probably reflect a little bit about what we see here.
Con las manos que matan en la noche acarician a sus hijos.
Colombia is in the midst of an uprising. In Cali, the epicenter of the unrest, there are daily confrontations between young protesters and police.
This is Siloé. It's a poor neighborhood in Cali where a lot of the sort of hottest action has been over the protests, and also where a lot of the deaths and disappearances have happened. So naturally, this is one of the places where people are most pissed off. ¿Es porque estamos nosotros?
Ustedes no nos disparan. Si no estuvieran, nos asesinarían. No les importa la vida, los derechos humanos, a ellos no les vale nada. Para nosotros, a ellos nada. Nosotros no valemos nada. Vamos, esto es lo que las balas que encontramos de lo que recogimos haciendo aseo en los puntos donde ellos están ubicando. Y ahí las puedo mostrar.
¿Eso es de ayer?
Sí, eso es de ayer.
Tenemos varios amigos que le han pegado varios impactos de eso y están en ese momento, pues unos están en el hospital, otros pues ya les dieron salida.
Nos están dando duro, nos están matando.
The unrest started in late April with a national strike protesting poverty, inequality, and government mismanagement. The strike brought thousands to the streets and caused shortages of basic goods like food and gasoline. The government responded with force. Human rights groups say police have killed more than 40 people so far. But the crackdown only deepened the anger and brought young people out in droves. The ones who do battle with the police call themselves La Primera Línea, the front line. They are the engine of the national strike. In the middle of Cali, they took control of a major intersection and turned it into an autonomous zone named Port Resistance.
Myriam, we're able to listen to it, but we haven't been able to see it.
Oh, okay. This is funny. Okay. For some reason, didn't share the screen. Right. I will put the link in the chat so that you can share this in the final recording. Yes, it's about 15 minutes long documentary, very interesting. But I just wanted for you to have a little taste of it, because it's a very good reporting on the ground, which is it's been quite difficult because the national media is not, the main national media is not interested in reporting this. So it's been good for the movement to have this international echo. So apologies for that. Not sure what happened with the sharing of the screen, but we will share the link, and you can actually see the full documentary. But why I wanted to show you this documentary is for you to actually understand a little bit better what the people are saying about the violence that the government has sent upon these young people. The amount of kids killed now is over 70. By the time he made this report was 40, but the figures have increased. Torture, violations of all kinds of human rights, missing people in a very difficult list of nearly 300. So the human rights situation in Colombia is absolutely devastating. And the anger of these kids have not been channeled through any kind of dialogue. It's been very hard to speak to the president, because he has put lots of delays to the negotiations, constantly back and forwards. I want this, I want that. Then the organized unions have gone back saying we need this agreement and let's stop the violence of the police. They wouldn't give up on this. On the contrary, the government a week ago published a decree 575 that empowers the military to take control over territories and positions that are usually by civil servants. So this is very, very complicated. This is very complicated because his response was to militarize more and to take control in the actual departments or regional states, which is in breach, obviously, of our constitution. And there are now efforts to take this to court because many constitutionalist lawyers have said this is absolutely not lawful. So it is a very difficult situation. We are stuck, completely stuck in a situation where the government doesn't want to offer any solution at all. The protesters have repression every night. The local channels are quite weak. the local governments are quite weak. They have, some of them have protested because of the decree, but some others just go along with the government and accept these military people coming to the offices and saying what's to be done and what's not to be done. So it is a very tricky situation. It's very hard to know now at this point what is going to come next, because the government from lower levels to top levels, they are completely in denial, trying to deny to the world what is happening, because the causes of this uprising are questioning deeply the structure of our economic model. And this is something they are not going to give up. We've seen during the pandemic how the government prefer to use the public resources into banks, financial corporations, international airlines, big companies, and absolutely nothing for the small businesses. And the small businesses are really cracked down on their economy. This is why this uprising has 73% of support from the population. Obviously, you have the other side of the coin, and then you have the blockades. The blockades that this movement started to use as a way to call attention. Because, as I said before, we've been having this situation from 2019. The national strike in 2019, it was just starting to get some kind of wave and power when the pandemic struck. And that was put on hold. But at that time, the government had exactly the same treatment. It was violence, it was killings, it was force, and nothing about dialogue, and they will not give up. This time, it was exactly the same. The only situation that changed was that these young people came now into the equation. It was no longer the traditional unions and sector of middle scale economy and all this. No, it was the people, especially in the city of Cali, where this report took place, where these people are absolutely, these kids are absolutely with a hole in their stomach. If they have a breakfast, they cannot have lunch or dinner. Some of them cannot eat at all. So these kids have absolutely nothing to lose, nothing. They got nothing. They got no prospects, no future, nothing. Numerous reports signal Colombia as one of the more unequal countries in the world, despite that we own many mines, gold mines, petrol, gas, oil, name it. We have resources in all sorts of minerals. We have water everywhere, but all this through corruption and through the selling of our resources to multinationals have really made our economy really weak for the majority and very strong for a very small minority. Like everywhere in the world where we see this kind of model where absolutely the state is minimized in order for the private capital to take over and control where the money goes, who owns the national resources, and all. This situation, of course, is not just Colombia. You could see in 2008, when the war started in this big financial crisis, where the money went immediately to save the banks. Well, it's exactly the same situation this time around in Colombia, plus a long history of violence, civil war, a national peace that was signed with the ex-guerrillas FARC-EP, which this current government decided not to implement to its full extent, but just a little bit here, a little bit there. And this is causing now a humanitarian crisis. The violence in Colombia hasn't stopped because of the peace agreement. On the contrary, this year alone, last time I checked on the organizations who record this humanitarian crisis, like in the past we had now the 42 massacre in Colombia only this year. Last year, we closed the year with 92 massacres in the rural regions, and the year before was the same. So the violence and the lack of implementation of the peace agreement, together with this aggressive economical model that doesn't really give any hopes for the young generations to one day be a university, have a career, own a house, perhaps maybe own a little car. This is something that is not possible for many kids in Colombia. And the political party who is in power represents a small minority but very powerful elites in Colombia who own most of the land. And this is historical. This is a historical problem why we have a civil war for 60 years. This political group that is in power, they represent these people, these landowners, large amounts of million of hectares of land are under their private administrations, and the corruption as well, the weakness of all the organisms that are supposed to oversee the state now are completely taken by the government. There is no independence of the legislative from the presidential office. The general attorney office is being absolutely shameful in their way how they have treated this situation. They have not taken any policeman of any kind of rank to the justice because of all these killings. Now about 70 kids have been killed, lots of torture, lots of detentions without a judicial order, which is illegal, but they are doing it openly because they know there's impunity. The impunity is one of the highest of the region. So it is a very, very boiling situation that we really don't know how exactly we are going to resolve this, because this movement of the young people is new. Some of them are very young. Most of the detainees are into 14 to 16 to 18 years old. Some others are older. So you have these kids, some of them are just kids from the street or from very poor neighborhoods who just don't have anywhere to go, and this movement is for them. It's been possible for them to eat, for example, because they have the communal kitchens. There are students who are in the university who are trying to lead one way or the other this movement, but it's all very new and it's all starting to create shape. And there's been a developments on that area. They have tried to create a network of these points of resistance now, so that they could start to create some kind of dialogue towards the local authorities and start making demands and negotiate. Because obviously, once this is start prolongating in the time, more and more, the state is taking them to detention. Some of them are disappeared, some of them are tortured or have sexual harassments once they are detained. So this is a very difficult situation. And of course, we as people who live outside the country and as Colombians living abroad, for us it's important to call the attention to the world about what is happening in our country, especially in the human rights violations, the police brutality, and also the responsibility that countries like this has in this situation, because the UK has not only is the pen holder of the peace agreements in Colombia, but the UK has treaties with Colombia to train the police forces, and lots of the money from British taxpayers are going to fund these police forces. So we are asking these questions here in United Kingdom to the government about what they're going to do about this, because they have lots of responsibility on this situation, because you cannot fund a police force and then not ask any questions about why all these brutalities happening. The evidence is overwhelming. They cannot say they don't know, because even media like Channel 4 made a very visually striking and clear piece on Colombia. So they cannot really say. The Guardian has been constantly reporting in an unusual, rare way, very objective about the situation. BBC a little bit more weak, but it's been telling people in the UK what is happening in Colombia. So there is no chance that the UK government can say we don't know what's going on, because they know. So what we as citizens living here in the United Kingdom, we started an EDM for an early day motion for Colombia, and we have managed to get the signatures of over 70 MPs, and we are now looking for more signatures so that we can ask these questions in Parliament, and ask and demand an answer for this situation. Obviously, the same questions have been asked to the European Parliament, and in the United States, some of the 55 congressmen there signed a petition to the government to stop funding this brutality, this brutal police force in Colombia. So for the first time, we have seen expressions, not like we would like to see, but there are people speaking up for Colombia who usually they don't. And I think it's because the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. They cannot say this is not happening, even though their Ministry of Justice want to say that none of this is true, that all this is just a plot from international terrorism and all sorts of arguments that are unbelievable, that they can think that anyone can take them seriously about this. I just want to finish you by hearing these questions in the same documentary that is done by the reporter to the Ministry of Justice, the current Minister of Justice.
Totalmente falso.
¿Qué cree usted que puede hacer el gobierno colombiano para defender su prestigio frente a la comunidad internacional, dada la crisis que enfrentan?
Fue una situación muy bien orquestada, yo lo siento así. Fue una situación que organizaron a nivel internacional para desprestigiar el país. Por eso ya he salido a varios medios internacionales a desvirtuar muchas cosas que están pasando, para que se den cuenta de que no es lo que a veces han registrado, que a veces las informaciones que han dado son completamente falsas. Hablar de una cantidad de decenas de muertos, de desaparecidos, cuando la práctica no es así.
Perdón, o sea, es un intento organizado de desprestigiar el país, pero ¿organizado por quién?
No, yo no te podría decir eso. Tocaría preguntarle al Interpol de aquí de Colombia, pero lo que uno siente como ciudadano, como ministro de Justicia, es que el ataque vino a nivel internacional por organizaciones criminales organizadas precisamente para legitimar a nuestro país.
¿Se refiere al paro nacional o...?
Pero claro que sí.
O sea, que el paro en general fue efectivamente una conspiración de organizaciones criminales internacionales.
Yo lo que considero es que el paro nacional se organizó desde luego por organizaciones colombianas, pero aprovecharon la coyuntura de estos criminales internacionales para poder atentar contra el Estado colombiano. Y lo que te decía hace un momento, están obstinados a como dé lugar en montar un gobierno de pensamiento distinto, haciendo ese tipo de atrocidades.
En términos muy básicos, algo que acaba de decir, ¿usted reconoce o no que ha habido decenas de muertos durante este paro nacional? Y muertos que según varios observadores fueron a las manos de la fuerza pública.
No me consta, pero lo que sí me he podido leer y documentar es que muchos muertos no han sido como consecuencia del paro que ha habido. Son hechos aislados en el cual se presentan por riñas callejeras, por intento de hurto, de robo, etcétera, y también hay muertos por otros diferentes sectores. Decir que los muertos que han habido son exactamente como consecuencia del paro nacional, eso es totalmente falso.
I hope you managed to see this one. But it's subtitle. Again, it's in the same documentary that I showed you before. Okay, thank you, Gary. Yes. Okay, good. Yes. Denial. Yeah. The Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, which is a located in Washington and an office in Costa Rica are now in Colombia, because sectors of Colombia asked for their visit. They arrived yesterday, and they're gonna start holding some public hearings during the next 3 days until the 10th of June. And they want to, initially the Minister for International Relations tried to tell them, no, you cannot speak, you can only come, yeah, first you cannot come. Then obviously there was lots of international pressure. Then they say, okay, you can come, but at the end of June. The commission then said, okay, if you don't allow us in the country, we are going to hold these public hearings online. And they set up a date, 27th of June. So the government sees this and they say, okay, they're going ahead anyway. So, okay, you can come, but you can only speak to the government. You cannot speak to anybody else. And the government, Defensoría del Pueblo, which is like a public defender who has done anything, absolutely nothing to defend people's rights. The general attorney, who we've seen is from the same political party. So when you have this kind of state offices like the general attorney being a member of your own party, don't expect independence. It's not possible. So basically, all these institutions are controlled by the government, because who is in the head of these institutions are openly members of and political supporters of the government. So it's not possible to say to the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, come and talk to all these people, they are independent, when we all know the reality is these people have been members of their party and have been members of the government in the past, and they supporters of these policies. So then the Inter-American Commission say, no, wait a minute, we have a mandate. We're going to speak to you, to the government, and to these offices that you are telling us about, but we are also going to hear the civil society, the victims, especially the victims, because we know that there are victims here. And so that's where we are now. Tomorrow they start the first public hearings. So this is what we are doing here, is talking over events that are being at the moment happening in Colombia. So my advice or my suggestion is to keep track of the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, Twitter, news, and any kind of public statement that they make from now to the end of the week, when they are gonna finish these public hearings. So all this is, as we speak, events are evolving in Colombia. So that's why I was saying at the beginning, it's impossible for me to say how this is going to resolve when things are happening as we speak. So that's probably the message I have to finish, is that we here in the UK are, as I was saying before, we're trying to ask these government questions, and we have the campaign that I'm going to put in the chat, and that I hope that you can send to your members as well, to sign this, ask your MPs to look at arguments and sign this EDM for Colombia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Myriam. Okay, so thank you for that. What we will do then, we will open the virtual floor for questions. So if anybody's got any questions or wants to make any comments, please just go ahead.
Well, no questions. That's good.
Okay. I don't want to be the first, but if no one else will, I can. No one else wants to jump in?
Go on, Gary.
Okay, I'll go for it. I was just kind of wondering if you could say a little bit more about, I know you've talked about it a bit, but why kind of now? Because, you know, I mean, a lot of things you've been talking about human rights violations, violence. I mean, you know, Colombia sadly has got a long history of that. I'm just kind of wondering what's now. Was it because, you know, as the title of the event is, it's kind of war, from war to peace to social crisis. I mean, is it that, you know, the peace agreement held out some hope and that seems to have kind of gone a little bit? Is it people are feeling disillusioned and disappointed about that, about having that kind of hope taken away? I'm just kind of wondering what it is, if you could say a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, indeed. I mean, we cannot say there is one thing, because Colombia has this particularity. Colombia is the size of Spain and France together. It's a big country, mainly rural country. And it seems like the cities and the countryside are like two different countries. So we cannot say that this uprising is because the peace agreement has not been implemented, because actually the urban areas of Colombia, they don't really understand the urban areas of Colombia, not necessarily understand the dynamics of the rural areas of Colombia. And this was something that was very difficult during the assignment of the agreement, that we have this referendum, and it was against the peace process. But in the rural areas, won, because they knew what it was to have the helicopters on top of the roof, sending bombs and all these killings and all these massacres and the rebels and everything. So the rural areas were for the peace, and the urban areas, some yes, some no. And we had the result, the disgraceful result that we had. And so why now? I think the pandemic put things in a clear perspective. As I say, in 2019, the unrest was starting to build up. People were starting to feel that this government had no plans, they will have no clear pathways, the problems were getting worse, he had no response, he was like in his war. And during the pandemic, this president created a TV program. Beyond belief, this man will sit every day during the pandemic and speak to television and create like an entertainment program around the pandemic. It was absolutely horrendous to see the president, people dying in hospitals every day, and he was holding this new broadcast every day, including Saturday and Sundays. So this was absolutely unbelievable. And the country was falling apart during the pandemic. The nurses didn't have their equipment. There was not enough beds in the units, in the UCI units. It was a crisis in the health system. Totally, people working without being paid for 2 to 3 months. And he comes in this national television program to tell that he was pushing a reform to privatize more the national health system. So the health system, because it's not national, the health system. So he just built up a lot of anger with his actions every day. And when I say he, it's because he represents a sector that is in power. It's not just him. It's not just him. It's him representing a sector of the elite of Colombia who is now ruling the country. So I think and then every day he turned up with policies that will make the life of the majority worse. And he, in an amazing and unbelievable situation, he will come up with something else that will make things even worse. So he was in a spiral to destroy the country in a way that nobody was saying to him anything. And it was just unbelievable. And for us who don't live in Colombia, we just couldn't understand how the president, in the middle of a pandemic, he was holding a program every day, even to joke about pandemic with, asking the sports, the reporters to tell how the pandemic was going, like a football match. And the banality of this president is just beyond when people are losing their jobs, when there's no food on the table, when kids cannot go to colleges, to universities, when the nurses and doctors are dying in piles because they have not the right equipment. So this man push until boom, yeah. And that's why the pandemic kind of put everything in perspective. Who is these people? What are they doing? Where they are taking us? They're taking us nowhere. And these kids realize if we don't do anything, we don't know where we are going to end up. And I think that was the government has a big role in this situation.
Yeah, sorry, I'm smiling because a lot of what you're saying could apply to the government in the UK and their response to the pandemic. So
the disconnection with the people was very clear. They did. You could hear in the, even though you couldn't see because we had this problem with the sharing, but you could hear the people saying there, for them, we don't have any value. For them, we don't have any value. We are nothing. We are worthless, the young people were saying. And I think that was what people felt. This is a movement for dignity, I think.
Thank you, Myriam. Do we have any other questions? You said, Myriam, that the coverage of the events has been quite unusual because it's been covered quite widely internationally and so on. But could you say a little bit more about how you feel about the coverage, not just in terms of quantity, but also quality? Is it fair? Is it well informed? Especially since you said that there are problems with reporting from the ground. So I'm just wondering how good the quality, how good the coverage actually is.
In comparison to previous year, I think it's a little bit better. Yeah, in comparison. Of course, before we didn't have any really press coverage at all. It was like we never existed. Maybe one or two eventually will come up, but very rare. Unless you are interested in Colombia, you will look for sources of information. Otherwise, we're not in the news. So yes, but as I said, it is a very difficult situation and to cover the protests. Many reporters have been injured during these demonstrations, mainly by the police. Absolutely, mainly by the police. International reporters and some local reporters have been, now they have death threats, and some of them have been escaping bullets, also being hit by the police. And so you have the press giving constant statements about the way how they've been treated by the public forces, and it's been hard for them to cover both sides of the arguments, because from the government side, it's like you could see in the report that we just showed, he went to the actual points of resistance, and then he went to speak to the Ministry of Justice, and you could see his answer. So yes, so there's been an effort this time around that previously we didn't have, and we have to value that. Whether there's been enormous amount of the press for understanding the causes of this economical model and why this economical model is sustained nationally and internationally is another matter. I could say there's been reports, but it's not been really studies, serious studies that can be published on this situation. So, but in comparison to previous year, there's been a little bit more efforts for the international press to at least show the world what is happening, even though they're not deep analysis or deep questions asked to who is responsible for this at the top of the chain, and they kind of just registering the problem. But probably that will be to ask too much. Definitely the national press is who are corporations that own these communications. They're really not interested. They just keep showing, oh, look at this window is broken. Oh, look at this bus incinerated. Oh, look at this door is broken. And so they just kind of very banal reporting, and most people in Colombia now, they just don't want to know about this media coverage. It's been questioned very deeply because they just don't have anything substantial to say. They just keep showing if people are queuing because the national strike don't allow certain routes of buses to move. So look at this problem, and not why people are protesting. So I think people are a little bit tired of all this one side of the story, just showing everything like an inventory of damages of physical property, and not real why people are confronting bullets, why people are putting their bodies in front of bullets, why take someone so young to stand in front of a policeman when they know that they are going to be killed. But what take these young people to do that? What kind of desperation they are in order to come out to the street and know they can be killed, and yet they go outside and protest. And these questions are not being asked by the national media.
Yeah, thank you. And since you're talking about international players as well, you mentioned specifically the UK, but I'm wondering about other countries as well. For example, Spain has a long history with Colombia as well, and maybe other countries as well, the US and so on. How are they dealing with this? How are they getting involved in any way?
No. There's been a complete silence. It is this, if you know the book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. We hope it was 100 years. This is a big one. This is like 500, 600 years of solitude. This is terrible. Mainly because the economy of Colombia is, in the last 35 years, has been depending on multinationals and the international financial corporations. And they are really the people who run the world, another expression. And if the economy has completely, our national economy is in detriment, because everything now is imported when we have the capacity to have resources to produce and to export. We are now importing everything due to the treaties, the commercial treaties, the international commercial treaties, the freedom of commerce, and all this narrative that is put in our economies on independence, depending of these big super economies in the world. So if, for example, United States is selling arms to Colombia, and the police is using them for this brutality, probably they're not going to say anything about the police brutality, because there are many people there who benefit of this arms selling. And I'm sure that's the same in other parts of the world with other countries. Or in the case of Colombia, we have enormous amount of gas and oil resources. Well, now they came, but in these last 30 periods of year, many multinational companies went there and big winnings on our country, taking everything, all the resources that we had, leaving very little to the country, and giving a big environmental damage to the regions where they were working their land for 20, 30 years contract, And now this is all a catastrophic landscape of just ruins behind ruins. And so these powers are international powers, and I'm sure these powers have control over what the government says and they don't say. Same thing with the financial system. Our banks are in the New York system networking of banking system and financial system and financial products and all this logic of accumulating and accumulating and even taking control over national resources to build more their pockets. So to whom do you speak in other governments? It's difficult. I mean, Spain haven't said absolutely anything about this situation. Must say El País, which is the national newspaper, have made one or two remarks on the situation, but nothing from the national government. Absolutely silence. It's like nothing is happening. And Spain has the big majority of reception of immigrants from Colombia because people are fleeing the country on an everyday basis. And Spain are the recipient of this large migration. And in this moment in Colombia and in the past years, and yet they failed to analyze this situation and to say why Colombia keeps producing victims, why Colombia keeps producing migrants, why Colombia keeps producing these people who cross the channel to come and see a refuge in our country. They're not asking these questions at all.
No, they're too focused on what's happening in Morocco right now, and that's what they're covering. That's what they're worried about, even politically. I don't know why. You're actually quite right. Why are they not more worried about this? They do pay attention to Venezuela, though.
Yes, unbelievable. It's very difficult to understand why a situation that in the human rights context is quantitative more complicated than Venezuela.
Yeah.
And yet all the focus is in Venezuela, but not in Colombia.
Yeah.
It's like selective. Which democracy is good for us and which democracy is a dictatorship and which dictatorship is a democracy and which, so it is all very, the values are really depending on the economical interests. And there are many companies from Spain in control of regions of Colombia, especially in the Caribbean coast. They have a big company who was taking advantage of the electrical and the supply of electrical power to the urban areas. And they were in a scandal behind a scandal, corruption behind corruption. And of course, they were absolutely untouchable because they were an international company. They couldn't make them pay for all the damage that they did. You have Spanish companies taking all the water from our main rivers and taking them to Spain because Spain has very little water resources and we have lots. And our water is being exported to Spain.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me, right? Because we don't have a clue.
Yes, right? The Rio Magdalena, the Magdalena River, exports big tanks of water in ships to Spain. And of course, all this is now been big in the news because all these agreements are done between local governments or national government with specific companies. So Spain does have interest in Colombia, financial interest, and I'm saying commercial elites, the financial elites of Spain have interest in Colombia. There's one very simple case. The ex-national attorney, Mr. Martinez, who left the office in the middle of big scandals because of the BREC and all this, he owns one of the a very large property in the middle of Madrid. And even though there are multiple accounts that this property is the product of corruption, the government of Spain has made no effort to inquire why this man is not paying tax in Spain and why he's not paying tax in Colombia for this property that already has been questioned for its sources. How come a lawyer who come from a very middle class, low middle class backgrounds, suddenly is a multimillionaire with properties in Spain, in Madrid, in the big Alamedas of Madrid, in New York, and then other brackets in the middle, big, like this is scandalous, is big in the middle, and everybody is silent. So this silent, it tells you a lot, and that's why perhaps, even though the situation in Colombia is so critical, we don't see government saying anything about it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so let's see where we go from here, right? Because obviously it's very difficult to know what will happen next, but how do you see things then developing in the future?
It's difficult to say what's going to happen. Yesterday, the National Committee for the National Strike, the negotiator committee, they decided to stop the dialogue, to stop these conversations, because they were being taken back and forwards, like, like playing with them. And they announced, okay, that's it. That we don't really see any serious efforts. We've been going back and forwards over the same, and we propose one thing, they come and say yes. Next week they come and say no. Then we counter propose, they come and say yes. Then the next week they come and say no. So it is a little bit like take them for fool, like fooling them around, and trying to delay the negotiations as much as they can, so that that rising gets weaker and weaker with the time, so they lose completely power, and probably people will start turning against it. So that's what they are trying to do. And yesterday this negotiating committee say, okay, this is our last. We're not gonna stay more in this game, and we're gonna step out, because all they're trying to win is time to make the movement weaker and not to come up with any solutions. And probably all these kids are gonna end up in jail.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
I can ask some more. I wanted you were saying you felt it was quite specific to Colombia, but I'm kind of wondering, because what we've been talking about is you turn to other the governments for support, in terms either because Spain has the connections and should offer support, or the UK because it says it supports human rights, but those governments are all neoliberal as well. So they, as you say, they're kind of they're not going to be too sympathetic. I was wondering whether you could see, and this is the problem for the kind of left generally, if you can see some sort of connections with other protests, which are likewise often led by young people. I'm thinking of obviously the Hong Kong protests, things like protests against making abortion illegal in Poland. If you're thinking about things that generated partly after the pandemic, you think of the Black Lives Movement. And obviously they're not specific, they're not kind of the same, but I'm just wondering if there are some points of connection of young people kind of saying this is no longer working for us, we've had enough.
Yes, I mean, I cannot say that the young people from the barrios, from the suburbs in Cali, who they probably don't have money to have internet, are going to be connected to these international movements. That will be a little bit too ambitious for me to say something like that. I don't think so. But let's say in other parts of the society, of Colombian society, there's been already a move to connect with women's rights movements worldwide. There's a movement for the environment, clearly, definitely, in middle-class kids. There's been an understanding of the need for peace, not only in Colombia, but in the countries where peace is still a challenge. I think also understanding international dynamics with economy. I think the people are more aware they need to strengthen the national production and stop being dependent of multinationals as international financial corporations. I think towards middle classes, more educated, these questions have started to come up, and with the digital communications that we have today, the networks, you could see some sectors of Colombia are now starting to connect to these movements worldwide. But I cannot say the same for the kids that if they can make a call, they cannot make two. Or if they have access to internet, it's on very special occasions. So it's a completely different, depending who you are. And the people who are now on the street, and majority, these kids are majority the ones that do not have money to put in their phones, lots of data to see conference worldwide and all these situations.
No, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that they know about it and they're going to talk to each other, these struggles in different countries, but it was just whether that's one of the common factors, that just young people are fed up, and this is realizing that these systems aren't working for them and pushing back. I mean, obviously the next question you've kind of pushed onto it is it just going to remain at the level of pushing back and protests? Is it possible for it to develop into something?
I think, yeah, I understand where you're going from your question. I think what is been clear now, we have elections next year. We have elections for Congress and we have election for presidency. And not all of them understand the need for this, but let's say an important portion of them understand that the only way to change the model, the economical model, and our political model is through elections and through winning power and control in the territories and in the national institutions like Congress and presidency, but also in the territories like local councils and departmental assemblies. And these are the areas where they need to focus now if they want to change the way how things are done. They need to change the flaws in the constitution. They need to change the way how we build our political system, the way how we are built in our institutions that's supposed to oversee the government, the way how the Congress is being elected. All this, they need to take control of it. Otherwise, we're going to keep going around and around and around, because the structural problems needs to be tackled by people taking control over these institutions and reforming them once and for all.
That's big.
Now we're heading towards that.
All right, any other questions, anyone? No?
I left in the chat the couple of links. One is for the letter to the MPs, and the other one is the full documentary link is here on the chat. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Myriam. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, just keep, please, supporting the Colombian cause, and please keep distributing these links as much as you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today. Thank you for that really good discussion. So what we will do is we will upload the recording of the webinar to the MeCCSA Social Movements Network YouTube channel. Well, actually, it's a MeCCSA YouTube channel. And then we will distribute the link when it's available so that other people can access it too. All right.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. Thank you, Myriam. And thank you everyone for attending today.
No, thank you to you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
Kari and Liliana. Now,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.